Today we've got the bargain bucket versus the not so bargain Five Guys burgers and fries. That's right, we've got the BMW M140i versus the Audi RS3. We're going to test their real world 0 to 60, 30 to 70, what MPG they really do, how much they cost to fill up, how far they get once you've filled up, and of course, how fun they are to drive. So let's get into it. My name's Tom, and you are watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. Steer, a little bit of oversteer, a lot of oversteer. Now, before you rush to the comments and say, well, you can't compare an RS3 to an M140i, the RS3 is more expensive. Well, this comparison is about whether it's worth spending the extra hard-earned cash to get the RS3 or just saving it and getting the BMW M140i. So which one is worth it? Let's start with the engine. RS3 up first, and this has the 5-cylinder turbo Daza engine. Daza basically means it's the best iteration of this 5-cylinder unit. It's got 400 horsepower and 480 Nm of torque. The BMW M140i actually has one more cylinder than the RS3 at 6, but it's got less power at 340 horsepower, but slightly more torque at 500 Nm rather than 480. The biggest difference for me though is how the power is delivered. The B58 in the M140i is very torquey. Torque comes in at just 1500 RPM, but it then runs out at just over 4,500 RPM, whereas the RS3 is a bit more like a rally car. The torque comes in at 1700 RPM, more like 2,500 to you and me, but it stays until 5,850 RPM. That is why a lot of owners of these cars basically say you have to rev this engine out to really feel the power, whereas the B58 just kind of has power everywhere. Which one is going to be quicker on the 30 to 70 sprint though? Let's find out.
So, scores on the doors then. Who won the 30 to 70 sprint? Well, sorry BMW fanboys, including me because I am one, the Audi RS3 won. It's the quicker car at the end of the day, so it's always going to do a better time. The Audi RS3 did 3.40 seconds on the money, and the BMW M140i did 3.86 seconds. Although having said that, the fastest time I've had out of an M140i was 3.80 seconds, and the slowest time I've had out of an RS3 was actually 3.92 seconds. So I suppose it kind of depends on the day, but one thing's for sure, traction is the limiting factor when it comes to the M140i.
Now, I'm not going to go through a full tour of both of the interiors of these cars, but let's just have a quick look so we get a good overview. This M140i Shadow Edition looks pretty nice. It's aging a little bit now, but it's still got all the features that you want, like a scroll wheel, optional touchscreen, physical climate controls, and some capacitive favourites buttons. The quality is also pretty decent. However, the RS3 is just a little bit better made in my opinion. Everything just looks a little bit nicer, a little bit better in terms of fit and finish, and you've got things like the virtual cockpit and a little bit more metal. Plus, the leather is just a little bit higher in terms of quality. In all honesty though, you would kind of expect that considering the RS3 cost about £10,000 more on average when compared to a BMW M140i. How do they drive though? Is it really worth spending that extra 10k to get the RS3, or should you just save your hard-earned cash and get the M140i and maybe spend a couple of grand on mods? Let's find out then, shall we? And start with the RS3. So we're going to start off with the Audi RS3 because a lot of people say this is just an understeering mess, and apart from the engine it doesn't really have a lot to offer. Well, I say you're wrong, and that's why we're starting with this car. First off, we're going to start around town, see what the suspension's like. Newsflash, it's better than the BMW M140i, mainly because we have adaptive dampers, otherwise known as MagRide. Being an Audi, I can use my favourites button to change us into dynamic, and they really firm up. You can really feel a big difference when going over speed bumps. Like just going over this one here, it just feels solid. It feels like a rally car. Then in comfort mode, everything slackens off. It feels like sway bars disconnect. Everything just becomes loose and comfortable, which is exactly what you want from something that's supposed to have dual personalities. The thing is though, even in comfort mode, it's not just the engine that tells you this is an RS product. There is something about the steering, just the way this drives that feels very sporty. Like the gearbox, the DQ500 dual clutch gearbox in this just feels a bit more raw when compared to other dual clutch boxes that Audi offer. And then everything just feels a bit more connected. It feels like there's more welding joints, that there's stiffer bushes. Everything just feels more tight. But we'll see whether that translates to better handling later. First though, let's go through some figures on how much MPG this does, how much does it cost to fill up, and how far will you get once you've filled up. So on the combined cycle, Audi will claim this thing will do 34 miles per gallon, which is not bad when you consider this is a high performance 400 horsepower hot hatch. It's got a 55 litre fuel tank, which if you use all of those litres at 34 MPG will get you 411 miles. But in reality, you're not going to use the whole fuel tank, are you? You're going to use about 3/4 of the tank, in which case that'll get you 308 miles. Then in terms of cost, a full tank of petrol at £1.45 a litre. A lot of people say that's too cheap, but I can actually get 99 RON fuel for £1.45 a litre. But yeah, that will cost you £79.75p, and for 3/4 of a tank, that will cost you about 60 quid, which all in all is not that bad if you're getting just over 300 miles to a tank. In reality though, if you're sitting in traffic like this, you're not going to be getting anywhere near that. Anyway, before we test out whether that MPG figure is real or not on our daily commute test, we are going to take this thing round and round about as usual and see how this handles. Before that though, we are going to sit in a bit of traffic. Okay, is this an understeering mess? Let's find out. Favourites button into dynamic. This will drop a couple of gears, make that DQ500 gearbox go into S, so shorter, sharper shifts. I get increased throttle response, heavier steering, stiffer dampers, and we're just going to go for traction off and a manual gearbox, I think. Let's see what we can do. So yes, a little bit of understeer initially, but once Quattro system figures out that you want to go fast and around the corner, it sends a lot of power to the rear and you get to enjoy a good bit of handling and some lovely, lovely 5-cylinder engine notes. Oh, that gear shift as well. That is gorgeous. Unfortunately though, it doesn't do much for fuel economy, as just after resetting the trip computer, I've now gone down to 15 miles per gallon. That will go back up though once we're on the motorway. Oh, the other thing you'll notice in this, no efficiency mode, which you do have in the BMW M140i. That's because this is a proper RS car, proper performance car. You know, they know you're not really going to be saving money on fuel in this thing. Anyway, traction back on, let's get ourselves onto the motorway and see what this thing's like. Right, coming onto the motorway then, this is where you notice there is a big lag in torque. So even if I give it half throttle, there we go, then the power comes in. It takes a goodly while though. So response, yeah, it could be better. But I mean, it's still a 5-cylinder engine, it's worth it, right? Then once you're on the motorway, damping, lovely and soft in comfort again. Gets rid of all those little undulations that you get on bumpy British roads. Wind noise is very low, it's an Audi. You get very nice acoustic glass as standard. And the road noise is not bad. Although the one thing I will say is if you're coming from something like an Audi S3, you will notice just a smidge more road noise if you've got an RS3 with the wider section front tyre. Plus, it just feels like the steering's a bit more connected, like you can feel a bit more texture coming through. So, you just definitely notice there's a little bit more noise coming into the cabin, but it's still a very quiet, luxurious car, especially for a hatchback. Like, as hatchbacks go, this is brilliant. But we will test the actual decibel level later, whilst we test the MPG. So let's go do that now, see what MPG we do, and see how noisy this thing actually is inside. Alrighty then, that's our little commute of 14 miles over.
Why do I do 14 miles? Because that's the average daily commute for a UK driver. We have managed 29.5 MPG and 74.6 decibels. So all in all, not that bad. Not far off the claim figures. So 20, oh now it's going up to 30 MPG actually. So yeah, about 30 miles per gallon on your average daily commute if you're just driving in comfort mode with a little bit of sporty driving and a bit of motorway driving. I'd say that's pretty decent, wouldn't you, for a car like this? How does it handle though? Really, how does it handle? Let's take it to a fast B-road first and find out. Okay, into dynamic, we're going to go... Actually, we'll leave the gearbox in S first, just to see how it reacts. Traction off, because we don't need that ridiculous feature. And we're going to see how this thing handles some faster stuff. Feels nice and stiff in dynamic. Mag Ride is such a good damper, honestly, so good. Look at this. Whoa, what is this lane discipline, people? Interesting number plate as well. Looks like it says Apple. But once you get your foot down, oh look. Not really any understeer. Wonder what's going on there. And yeah, you can't really get even to fourth gear before you run out of speed limit, unfortunately. This car is properly quick. Once you're above 4,000 revs, oh, it's just a monster. It absolutely is. Gearbox, I'm going to go for manual though, because I think I know what I'm doing better than the car does. Especially considering I can see where I'm going. Right, windows down. Let's have a little taste of noise because it's a freaking RS3. That's just the standard sports exhaust as well. No resonator delete, no Remus exhaust system. That is a factory exhaust system. You don't really get that these days, do you? Soft limiters and blimmin' horrible OPFs. Petrol particulate filters. This car was made when they were allowed to sound nice still. One thing I really like about this virtual cockpit as well is that it'll come up with shift lights telling you when to shift. And it means you don't really have to look down. You're like, your eyes kind of just catch the colours in your peripheral vision. It's a nice feature, that. Anyway, brakes, RS brakes are just absolutely stonking. Wow. Yeah, bite point is lovely and they are extremely effective. But what if I really go for it? Ooh, bit of oversteer. It's an Audi. Should it do that? I don't think so, but it's an RS Audi. Oh, it's a shame the speed limits are so low in this country. You just really want to wring the engine out. And the thing is, the engine is wanting to be wrung out. It wants to go quickly. But you know what? Unless you're taking this thing to a track, faster B roads, you're not really going to feel any understeer in this thing. It's very different to an Audi S3. Very different. Totally different league. And it's not just the engine, the chassis. Whatever they've done, it feels totally different to an S3 or a VW Golf R. Oh, that noise. Some say the noise is worth it alone. For me though, I do like having a lot of fun behind the wheel, and Audis of the past have always been a bit lackluster, but this generation of RS3, it really does just feel like a freaking rally car. Oh, that's foul. Yeah. Oh yes, it's properly fast. On real roads, I don't think there's many cars that are keeping up with this, in all honesty. You know, unless you're talking like a Lamborghini Huracan. you're looking at supercars before you're keeping up with this thing. The way it holds the road is just absolutely bonkers. The only thing I wish is that you got some slightly better shift pedals. Plastic shift pedals in an RS product. Same in an Audi R8, to be honest. It's just... oh. Disgustingly good. That's the way I describe it. This car, it eggs you on so much, honestly. There are not many cars out there that egg you on as much as this does. It's like it's just whispering in your ear, just like, come on, put me in dynamic, go fast please, you know you want to. It's just like, so good. Right, let's take this thing to a smaller B-road now, and I'll show you why I keep telling you this thing is more like rally car than a road car. Alrighty then, what's this little rally car like? Wait for these cyclists to go past, then we can give it some. Yeah. Immediately, the engine, once you're above 4,000 revs, is just a monster. Suspension, very stiff. And yeah, oh, it's just an absolute weapon on a B-road, this thing. Brakes, oh, stonking. Oh, coming out of corners like that. It's one of the few cars that can actually make you feel a bit sick because it's so fast. Right, can we hit 60 before the corner? This is where you're going to see the lack of responsiveness from the turbo. So foot down now. Now we got power. Oh yeah, we can easily hit 60 before the corner. It's an RS3. The front end bite from this thing as well is just monumental. It just digs into the tarmac, fires you down the road. It's foul! It's one of those cars that makes every other bit of traffic feel like they're driving really slow, because it's just so capable. It masks its speed so well. And that's a sign of a car that's really well sorted. One last time then. That gear shift noise is orgasmic. And round corners like this, you're not understeering, that's for sure. Throttle response as well is just mega. Yeah, my head hit the ceiling there. Definitely didn't go in the air. And the brakes maintain their composure. One thing I don't understand is why they didn't put better seats in this. Whilst they're very comfortable, they do not hold you in place at all. And in all honesty, for me, that's the only real shortcoming with this car. It's special, it's unique, and there's a reason it cost a lot of money. It's because it's just good. It is just a good car. It's exciting, it makes you smile. And no, it's not just the noise and the engine that makes this worth the money. Although, it's definitely a big part of it. Right, let's hop in the BMW M140i now and see how that compares. Okay, hopping into the M140i, what's the first thing that you notice? Well, for one, it's a BMW, not an Audi. Secondly, you notice immediately the suspension is stiffer, which is weird. This is not a proper M car, this is just an M Lite. But yes, this car definitely has slightly stiffer suspension, and unfortunately it's just not as well sorted. It doesn't feel as expensive. It's just a bit overly stiff and a bit pogo-y. You get that kind of pogoing effect going over bumps. It doesn't settle straight away. So that's definitely 1 point for the Audi. But then you notice something else. It's got a better seating position. That's right, unfortunately Audi are they've never been that good at getting the right seating position. Whereas BMW, I mean, this is just absolutely bang on, nice and low. I can adjust the pitch of the bass just like I can in the Audi, but it's just the position itself is just so much better. It just feels right. Steering is a little bit lighter in comfort mode, which is interesting. Although you can definitely feel, well, actually no, you can't feel, because there is less feel than the Audi, which is very weird considering that's an all-wheel drive car. You'd think more mechanical gubbins going on up front would contaminate the steering feel a bit, but no, this feels a little bit too electric to me. Still, I mean, you still know where it's going, but it's just not quite as nice as the Audi. It doesn't have as much texture. My favourite word of the day, that. But it's still, I would say, a better town car, mainly because of one thing, and that is the engine. The torque just comes in sooner, the car just responds sooner, and the gearbox is just smoother. The dual clutch unit in the RS3 is very snappy when you want to drive fast, but the ZF 8-speed torque converter gearbox in this is just much better at negotiating traffic. And me personally, I have quite a lot of mechanical sympathy, right? And for some reason with dual clutch gearboxes, it's like I can feel that they're burning the clutch. It feels like they're slipping the clutch too much to me. Whereas with the torque converter, I don't feel quite as bad, because it doesn't really feel like it's burning through clutches to me. But you can see, just pulling away from standstill, it's just buttery smooth. Gear changes from first to second can be fairly rough if the gearbox is cold, but it's still better than a dual clutch unit. So despite the fact that suspension is better, it's definitely the M140i that wins for me driving around town. Then in terms of fuel economy, this is claimed to do 39 MPG on the combined cycle, which I do believe. The B58, despite being a 3-litre engine, is actually really efficient. It's unreal how efficient this engine can be. You know, in an M140i before, I've seen nearly 50 miles per gallon, which is just crazy for an engine of this size. But of course we will see what the actual figure is once we get on the motorway. Then we've got a 52-litre fuel tank, which if you do 39 mpg will get you 446 miles, so slightly more than the Audi. But then of course if you use 3/4 of a tank, which is what you're actually going to use, you're going to get 334 miles, which is just very slightly more than the RS3 as well. Plus, obviously being a smaller tank, it's going to be slightly cheaper to fill up. So a full tank is £75.40 and 3/4 of a tank is £56.55. So all in all, to me at least, it sounds like it's going to be a little bit cheaper to run. But we'll see if it can actually beat that 30 mpg figure that the Audi RS3 did later on. Also, we're going to test how noisy it is inside. Is it going to be slightly noisier than the RS3? The Audi was pretty quiet inside for a sporty car. But this BMW 1 Series is still a premium product, so we shall see how it'll do. Before that, let's get the traction control off, get us into sports mode, or sports plus I should say, and see if this is any more fun than the RS3. Alrighty then, sports plus mode, gearbox over into S. This will drop a gear, make the gear shift slightly sharper, and throttle response is increased, steering is sharper as well. I'm going to go for manual gears. Plus, sports plus mode actually turns the traction control off but leaves the stability control on, so you can have a little bit of fun, which I shall demonstrate now. Benefit of rear wheel drive is that. And it's still plenty quick enough. The only thing I'm missing, right, and I know this might sound bad to a lot of the B58 fanboys, it's a bit of noise. The 5-cylinder just has this character to it that you just do not get in this B58 inline 6. It's just too smooth, almost, is the way I'd describe it. But undeniably very strong in terms of performance. And the thing is, rear-wheel drive, it is just more fun. It really is just more fun. Because you've got to do more, you have to interact with the car more than you do with an all-wheel drive setup. Anyway, let's get ourselves into Eco Pro now. Unlike the Audi, this thing has an Eco mode because it's not a full-fat M car. And we're going to see what kind of MPG we can get, although we will leave start-stop off. Coming onto the motorway then, even though we're in Eco mode, there is just so much torque, so if I give it half throttle, the power just comes in sooner than it does on the Audi RS3. And it means for daily driving at least, it's actually a little bit more pleasant because it's just a bit smoother. Then once you are on the motorway, the only real downside is that the suspension is just a little bit jittery still. It's not quite as settled as the Audi is. So once you're up to speed, I'd say the Audi is better, but getting up to speed, this is smoother and more relaxing. But we still got cruise control, whack it on 70 miles an hour. Road noise, I'd say it's actually less than the Audi. I think because there's just less connections to the chassis. But it's definitely a little bit less, I think. And wind noise, it's very close. I think the Audi might be just a smidge quieter in terms of wind noise. But I think because there's a little bit less road noise, it kind of balances out. We'll see what the reality is though when I use my proper decibel reader later. But very closely matched. Which one would I rather do a 12-hour journey in though? Do you know what? I'm going to say the Audi. It's just the suspension. It's just a bit more comfortable. Anyway, let's see what our MPG figure and our decibel figure is. Righty-ho then, what did we manage? Well, MPG-wise, the B58 is king. It did 35.7 miles per gallon. So yeah, it's definitely more efficient than the Audi. But what about in terms of noise levels? Well, we did basically the same, 74.8 decibels. So they're pretty evenly matched, although I will mention this, the tone of the sound actually coming into the cabin is a little bit higher pitched in the 140i, whereas it's a little bit lower in the RS3. And take that how you will. I think the RS3, to me at least, just sounds a little bit calmer inside. But I mean, it's so close that does it really matter? Maybe on like an 8-hour journey. The main thing for me is the suspension though. The RS3 definitely has better suspension. Anyway, which one is more fun? Let's go into Sports Plus now. Traction off, gearbox into manual, and see what we can manage, shall we? Interestingly enough, the gearbox feels basically just as fast as a dual clutch unit. No understeer, a little bit of oversteer, a lot of oversteer. And acceleration is mighty. One thing you notice though is that the top end isn't nearly as fizzy as it is in the Audi RS3. It definitely loses a bit of punch above about 5,000 RPM. And the thing is, you only really notice that when you drive the cars back to back, because this engine feels so fast anyway. Brakes, ooh, yeah, RS3 brakes are miles better. Definitely in terms of feel at least. Sound, just a stock exhaust on this. Yeah, it's nice, smooth, inline 6 noises, but it's not a patch on the 5-cylinder, is it? For me though, people say these don't handle that well, and it kind of does to me, to be honest. Like, it's only the suspension and the lack of limited slip diff that really let it down. With those two things, you know, better suspension and an LSD, I mean, it's a pretty good handling car in all honesty. Even in stock form, it's not that bad. People go on and on about this thing, you know, not being able to do anything. Yet, in reality, it's all right. You know, round a track, I think Auto Express tested this years ago. The M140i wasn't far off an RS3. Like that, doesn't really understeer. Properly fast. And this is just a stock car. Remember, you're going to have £10,000 of extra cash if you want to spend on mods for this thing. That includes dampers, a diff, a remap, and even then you've still got like over £5,000 left. Yeah, the brakes are definitely better in the RS3, but the gearbox, the ZF8 speed is brilliant in this. You can get something called an XHP gearbox map, which makes the shifts even sharper. Makes it similar to the latest G80 M3, just awesome shifts. But even in stock form, it's pretty decent. There you notice it, if you keep your foot flat round corners, inside wheel lifts a little bit, and because you don't have an LSD, you notice it just kind of loses grip a little bit. You get that inside tyre fire. Fun factor wise though, even though I can get this thing sideways, I don't know, the Audi just has something about it that's really satisfying. It feels like a bit of a race car, whereas this is just kind of like hooligan vehicle. You know what, this reminds me of like old C63. Anyway, how is this thing going to handle down a small B-road? Is it going to be better, faster than the Audi? Or is it going to be, well, a bit pants? Let's find out, shall we? Actually, do you know what? Before we test the M140i on a smaller B-road, let's do a 0 to 60 test for both of these cars, starting in the Audi RS3. To get into launch control mode, you just put the car into dynamic and then you switch the traction control in its first setting, like off. So traction control's off, but stability is on, so it's not all the way off. TSC in sports, basically. Then hard down on the brake, hard on the throttle. You'll go into launch control, listen to that lovely noise, let go of the brake, and oh my god, you're off. And that's 60. Right, let's pull over and see what we did. So the Audi RS3 managed 4.02 seconds. Now, as you can see on that run, it is slightly uphill, but the M140i will be tested on exactly the same bit of road. But yeah, it's claimed 3.9 to 60 and 4.1 seconds 0 to 100. So it's very, very consistent. 4 seconds 0 to 60 though is blisteringly quick. And I know on a flat bit of road, it will actually do a slightly quicker time. Right, now let's hop into the 140 and do a 0 to 60 in that. Okay, M140i up next for the 0 to 60 test. To get it into 0 to 60, Sports Plus, gearbox over into S, basically the same as the Audi RS3. Foot down, hard on the brake, hard on the throttle, you'll see launch active, but the problem is if you hold it down for too long, it will then start doing a burnout. So you have to literally plant your foot on the throttle and then go pretty much straight away. So let's do that. Bit of loss of traction. Oh, not that fast. Right, let's pull over and see what we did. So, claim time 0 to 60 is 4.4 and 0 to 100 kilometers an hour is 4.6. What did we manage? We did 5.99. Yeah, that's not ideal. Same bit of road as the RS3, and yeah, without all-wheel drive, unless you've got perfect conditions, you're not going to do a very good job. I'm going to do another run without launch control because I believe I can do a better time myself. I'm a bit cocky like that. I think I'm better than a machine. So let's do that now and see if I can do a better time. Okay, take two with the 140 0 to 60, except I've got the DSC all the way off. Same bit of road. I'm in manual now, so I'm going to control the gears myself. Let's give it a little brake boost, not too much because we want to be nice to the gearbox, and see what we can do. So little brake boost, go. Feather the throttle, change it to second early, change it to third. Felt better to me. That's 60. Let's pull over and see what time we managed. Okay, was I better than launch control? Let's find out. Yeah, I was, but we still only did 5.15 seconds. So it just goes to show that, yeah, if you don't have all-wheel drive, you ain't going to beat a car that does have all-wheel drive. I did have a little bit more fun feathering the throttle though. And just goes to show launch control in these is absolutely pants. The fact I can get a time that's nearly a whole second better when the tyre temperatures are the same as well is pretty telling. Anyway, let's go to a B-road. Alrighty then, B-road time. I've turned the traction all the way off because I'm kind of used to a 140i now. And once the tyres are warm, it's actually alright. That mid-range torque of this engine is just freaking insane. You really don't need more power than this. In all honesty, handling mods are what this car needs first. I mean, just feather the throttle in coming out of corners. That's where you'd lose time over an RS3. RS3 can just hammer it out of corners. Anyway, let's see if we can hit 60 before the corner. Let's go. Let's foot flat in first gear. A little bit of traction loss, but yeah. Still pretty controllable, all things considered. And pretty quick as well. Steering's pretty nice, know what the car's doing. Still not as good as the RS3 though. And the suspension, even though it's stiff, it doesn't really control the weight of the car that well. But the balance, undeniably, pretty decent. Tiny bit of understeer under corner entry because we've just got skinny tyres, but once you're in the corner, it's a little bit better than the Audi, I think. last time for good measure then. And yeah, speed-wise, the Audi is definitely getting down here quicker than this is. But do you know what? It's not far off. People saying a Golf R is quicker than this. They haven't driven one of these. They do not know what they are talking about. This will rinse a VW Golf R, even on a slightly damp B-road. But the big question, the conclusion, is the RS3 really worth the extra cash over a 140i? Now then, the RS3 is a complete package. You could buy that car and do nothing to it and you would be as happy as Larry. The 140i, on the other hand, you get a great engine, but it's not a complete package. The chassis is just lacking a lot in terms of control and just overall refinement. You need to spend quite a bit of money to extrapolate and exploit what that engine can really do. That includes a diff, which is just under £2,000, maybe just above that if you include fitting, proper Bird's suspension, or BA Bilstein dampers, basically the same thing. The Bird suspension is just a little bit fettled, and that's another £2,000, so that's £4,000 already. Then you might want to get an engine remap. Then you need to spend an extra £1,000 on things like bushes and maybe an underbody brace, etc, etc. So all in all, you've got to spend about £5,000 to get this thing into a really sorted, complete package. So in reality, it's about 5k cheaper than an Audi RS3, the equivalent Audi RS3. And for me at least, that 5-cylinder engine, it just does something to me that the B58 doesn't quite do. They're very different cars at the end of the day, and they approach being a hot hatch very differently, but fundamentally there's a reason the value of the RS3 is holding so well. And I think it's just because it's a really good car. You know, the sound, even things like the sound system are slightly better. It's just like a car that's 10% better in every regard. Maybe apart from fun. I'd say this is fun, but in a different way, because it's just a bit silly. But despite the fact I own a 140i myself, yep, I think the RS3 is fundamentally a better car, and is worth the extra money. Now the next question is, why haven't I bought one? Well, the only reason for that is because I can't bloody afford one. Anyway, on that note, I think we'll leave the video there. Anyway, as always, if you like content like this, please give it a like and want to subscribe, as not only can you see more content like this, you can of course see everything we have for sale, which includes this lovely BMW M140i and that even more lovelier Audi RS3. There'll be links for both cars down in the description, and if there isn't, then the cars are sold. I'm sorry you missed them, but hot hatches sell pretty quickly, unfortunately. It's the nature of the game. Anyway, my name has been Tom, and you have been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.